Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam Number 5. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. Litware Gaming uses Amazon S3 to store player telemetry data. The data is accessed frequently for the first 14 days for real-time analytics, occasionally accessed between 15–90 days for monthly reporting, and retained for 2 years for compliance. The access pattern is predictable and consistent, which S3 storage strategy minimizes costs while meeting all requirements. Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Storing data in S3 standard for the first 30 days, the minimum required before transitioning to IA classes, then transitioning to S3 standard IA for monthly reporting access, and finally transitioning to S3 Glacier Deep Archive after 90 days provides the lowest cost for this predictable access pattern. Glacier Deep Archive is the cheapest storage class and is appropriate for compliance data that is retained but not accessed during the remaining retention period. S3 Intelligent Tiering charges a monthly monitoring fee per object and is designed for unpredictable access patterns. Since this workload has a predictable and consistent pattern, lifecycle rules with explicit transitions are more cost-effective. S3 One Zone IA stores data in a single availability zone, which creates a durability risk inappropriate for compliance data that must be retained for 2 years. S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval provides millisecond access but costs more than Glacier Deep Archive, and since the data after 90 days is only retained for compliance and not actively accessed, the faster retrieval is unnecessary. Question 2. A data engineer at Fabricam Corp is setting up an AWS Glue connection to access an Amazon RDS instance in a private VPC subnet. The Glue ETL job also needs to write results to Amazon S3. After configuring the VPC, subnet, and security group for the Glue connection, the job fails with a timeout error when attempting to write to S3. Which 2 configuration changes are required to resolve this issue? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. When an AWS Glue ETL job runs within a VPC through a Glue connection, it loses direct internet access and cannot reach S3 through the public endpoint. An S3 VPC gateway endpoint must be added to the root table of the subnet where the Glue connection is configured, enabling the job to access S3 through the private AWS network. The self-referencing security group rule is required because Glue ETL jobs communicate between distributed Spark executors running within the same security group, and without this rule, internode communication fails. Outbound HTTPS to S3 IP ranges is not sufficient because S3 IP ranges change frequently, and the gateway endpoint is the recommended approach. A Glue interface endpoint is for accessing the Glue API itself, not for enabling Glue job access to S3. DNS settings are important for endpoint resolution, but are typically enabled by default and are not the primary cause of S3 write timeouts. Question 3. Tailspin Energy uses Amazon DynamoDB to store IoT device readings with a partition key of device ID and a sort key of timestamp. The application frequently queries all readings for a specific device within a date range. The team also needs to query readings by sensor type across all devices with eventual consistency. Which index strategy should the team implement? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. A global secondary index with sensor type as the partition key and timestamp as the sort key enables efficient queries across all devices filtered by sensor type, supporting only eventual consistency, which matches the requirement. The GSI has its own partition key that differs from the base table, enabling the cross-device access pattern. A local secondary index uses the same partition key as the base table, device ID, so it cannot query across all devices by sensor type. A GSI with device ID as the partition key and sensor type, as the sort key still requires knowing the device ID first and does not support the cross-device query pattern. Adding a filter expression on sensor type does not reduce read capacity consumption because DynamoDB applies filters after reading the data, resulting in a full table scan that consumes significant RCUs. Question 4. Tailspin Insurance runs a data mesh architecture where each domain team owns Amazon Redshift serverless workgroups in separate AWS accounts. The central governance team needs to provide the marketing domain access to a curated customer dataset from the sales domain. The marketing team should only see customer demographic columns, not financial data columns. Which combination of steps should the data engineer implement? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option B and Option E. Creating a view with only the required demographic columns ensures the marketing team cannot access financial data columns, enforcing column-level restrictions at the Redshift level. Sharing the data share through the Lake Formation catalog using AWS RAM enables cross-account data sharing with proper governance controls. This approach combines Redshift's native data sharing with Lake Formation's centralized governance. Sharing the full customer table without column restrictions would expose financial data to the marketing team. While Lake Formation column-level permissions could work, using views within Redshift data shares is the more straightforward approach for Redshift to Redshift sharing. IAM resource-based policies do not provide column-level filtering for Redshift data. Question 5. Adatum Commerce runs a DynamoDB table with DynamoDB streams enabled to capture item-level changes. The data engineer needs to replicate these changes to an Amazon S3 data lake for long-term analytics. The solution must support retention beyond 24 hours, allow multiple downstream consumers, and integrate with Amazon Data Firehose for S3 delivery. Which approach meets all requirements with the least operational overhead? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option B. Kinesis data streams for DynamoDB provides up to 365 days of retention, compared to 24 hours for DynamoDB streams, supports multiple consumers reading from the same stream, and integrates natively with Amazon Data Firehose for managed delivery to S3. This is a fully managed approach requiring minimal operational effort. DynamoDB streams with Lambda is limited to 24 hours of retention and a single consumer per shard, plus Lambda adds operational complexity for batch management and error handling. A KCL application requires provisioning and managing compute resources. DynamoDB export to S3 is designed for periodic full or incremental exports using PITR snapshots, not continuous change data capture streaming. Question 6. A data engineer at Litware Digital is configuring Amazon Managed Service for Apache Flink to process e-commerce order events from Kinesis data streams. Orders can arrive out of sequence due to network delays, and the business requires accurate revenue calculations based on when orders were actually placed, not when they were received. Late arriving events up to 5 minutes should be included in calculations. Which Flink configuration should the data engineer implement? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option B. Event time semantics use timestamps embedded in the order events, the actual order placement time, ensuring revenue calculations are based on when orders were placed regardless of arrival order. Watermarks track event time progress, and the 5-minute allowed lateness configures Flink to wait for late arriving events within that window before finalizing results. Events arriving beyond the watermark threshold can be sent to a side output for separate handling rather than being silently dropped. Processing time uses the wall clock of the processing machine, which would calculate revenue based on arrival time rather than order time, producing inaccurate results when events arrive out of order. Session windows group events by activity gaps, not by fixed time periods suitable for revenue aggregation. Global windows with wall clock triggers effectively behave like processing time and do not account for event ordering or late arrival patterns. Question 7. A data engineer at Tailspin Technologies needs to build a real-time fraud detection pipeline. The pipeline must read transaction events from Amazon Kinesis data streams, apply complex event processing with stateful windowed aggregations, and detect anomalous patterns by comparing each transaction against a rolling 30-minute window of prior transactions per customer. The solution must guarantee exactly once processing semantics. Which service should the data engineer use for the stream processing component? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Amazon Managed Service for Apache Flink, formerly Kinesis Data Analytics, is purpose-built for stateful stream processing with exactly once processing semantics via checkpointing. It natively supports complex windowed aggregations, including sliding windows, which is required for the rolling 30-minute per customer analysis. Flink maintains state in RocksDB and provides event time processing with watermarks for handling late arriving data. Oz Lambda processes records in microbatches and does not natively support stateful windowed aggregations or exactly once semantics across invocations. Amazon Data Firehose is a delivery service for near real-time loading to destinations, not a stream processing engine capable of complex event processing. EMR with Spark structured streaming could handle the processing, but requires significant cluster management overhead compared to the fully managed Flink service. Question 8. A multinational corporation needs to continuously consume streaming data from an Apache Kafka cluster, transform it in flight, and deliver results to Amazon S3. Tasks regularly take over 15 minutes to complete. Which AWS service best handles this workload? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. AWS Glue streaming ETL jobs run continuously, consuming data from sources including Apache Kafka and Amazon MSK, and are specifically designed for long-running streaming transformations without any execution time limit. Lambda has a hard 15-minute execution ceiling per invocation, making it unsuitable for tasks that regularly exceed this duration. Data Firehose supports data transformation through Lambda functions, which are subject to the same 15-minute limit, making complex transformations impractical. OzBatch is optimized for discrete batch jobs submitted as independent workloads, and cannot directly consume data from a streaming source like Kafka in a continuous fashion. Question 9. Contoso Media uses Amazon QuickSight Enterprise Edition to build dashboards for marketing, finance, and executive teams. The marketing dataset contains customer-level data, and the team requires that marketing analysts only see data for customers in their assigned regions. Finance users should see all regions, but should not have access to personally identifiable columns, such as customer name and email. Which combination of QuickSight features should the data engineer configure? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Row-level security in QuickSight restricts which rows users can see by mapping user groups to specific data values, allowing marketing analysts to view only customers in their assigned regions. Column-level security, available in Enterprise Edition, restricts access to specific columns, preventing finance users from seeing PII columns like customer name and email while retaining access to all other columns across all regions. Creating separate datasets per region increases maintenance overhead and does not scale when region assignments change. QuickSight Q enables natural language querying, but does not provide data access restrictions. Calculated fields with masking logic would require complex implementation and could be bypassed by users creating their own analyses from the underlying dataset. Question 10. Contoso Healthcare has an Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL database with sensitive patient data. The application team needs RED replicas to handle reporting queries, and the disaster recovery team requires the database to be available in a secondary AWS region with less than 1 second of replication lag. The application also uses AWS Lambda functions that frequently open and close database connections. Which combination of Aurora features should the data engineer configure? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option B and Option C. Aurora Global Database provides cross-region replication with typically less than 1 second of replication lag, meeting the disaster recovery requirement for a secondary region. RDS Proxy provides connection pooling that is especially valuable with Lambda functions, which create many short-lived connections that can exhaust the database connection pool. RDS Proxy reduces failover time by up to 66% and manages connection multiplexing efficiently. Aurora Serverless VTWO with Autopause addresses cost optimization, but not the specific disaster recovery or connection management requirements stated. Aurora Backtrack is MySQL only and provides cluster rewind capability, not cross-region disaster recovery. Multi-AZ deployment provides high availability within a single region, but does not meet the cross-region requirement. Question 11. Fabricam runs a streaming data pipeline using Amazon Kinesis data streams with the Kinesis client library. The operations team notices that the getRecords.iterator age milliseconds CloudWatch metric is consistently increasing over several hours. What does this indicate and what should the data engineer do? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option B. GetRecords.iterator age milliseconds measures the age of the last record returned by GetRecords relative to the current time. A consistently increasing value indicates that the consumer is processing records slower than they are being produced, causing the consumer to fall further behind. The solution is to increase consumer processing capacity by adding KCL workers, resharding to increase parallelism, or optimizing consumer processing logic. This metric does not indicate retention period expiration. Right-side throttling would surface as provision throughput exceeded exception on put record calls, not in consumer iterator age. Service level throttling would appear as different error metrics rather than increasing iterator age. Question 12. Fabricam is deploying an Amazon EMR cluster using Apache Spark for long-running ETL workloads and requires high reliability with persistent data storage. Which storage and compute combination is most cost-effective? Select 1 answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option D. EMRFS stores data persistently in Amazon S3, meaning data survives cluster termination and can be accessed across cluster restarts or failures, which is essential for reliable long-running workloads. AWS Graviton instances provide up to 40% better price performance compared to equivalent 5th-generation x86 instances, making them the most cost-effective compute choice. HDFS is fast for intermediate data but stores data on the cluster's local disks, which are ephemeral and lost when the cluster terminates, making it unsuitable for persistent storage. The local file system also stores data ephemerally and is only available during the instance lifecycle. Spot instances can be interrupted at any time by AWS, which undermines the high reliability requirement for enduring ETL workloads. Question 13. Litware runs a complex weekly analytics workload on Amazon Redshift, requiring launching a cluster, processing and loading data to S3, and terminating the cluster. The company wants to minimize operational overhead while automating all tasks. Which solution offers the least overhead? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Amazon Redshift serverless automatically provisions, scales, and releases compute resources in response to workload demand. The weekly analytics job can be initiated directly without managing cluster lifecycle. Redshift serverless spins up capacity when a query arrives and winds down after the workload completes. This eliminates the need to script cluster creation, configuration, and termination, and charges apply only for the compute time consumed during active processing. Amazon Redshift Spectrum is an extension to a provisioned Redshift cluster that queries S3 external tables. It requires an existing running cluster and cannot operate independently, so the cluster lifecycle management burden remains. Amazon Athena is serverless for SQL queries against S3 data, but does not provide the full data warehousing capabilities of Redshift for complex analytical workloads, requiring sorted columnar storage, distribution keys, and Redshift-specific optimizations. Apache Oozie on EC01 requires provisioning EC01 instances, installing and configuring the Oozie workflow scheduler and its Hadoop dependencies, and managing the underlying infrastructure, which represents the highest operational overhead of all options. Question 14. A company runs workloads across 5 Oz regions, each with its own HR department using distinct IAM roles. Employee data is stored centrally in an S3-based data lake. HR departments should only access employee records from their own region. Which strategy enforces this with the least operational overhead? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. AWS Lake Formation provides centralized fine-grained access control, including row-level and column-level permissions. By registering the S3 location with Lake Formation and creating data filters based on the region attribute, administrators can enforce which rows each IAM role can access from a single governance console without splitting data or creating per-role S3 policies. IAM roles and policies operate at the resource level, controlling access to S3 buckets and objects, but they cannot filter rows within a data object based on data values. Splitting data across 5 S3 buckets requires duplicating physical storage and managing separate bucket policies for each region, increasing both storage costs and operational complexity. Creating separate data filters at the IAM role level is not a native IAM capability. Row-level data access control requires a service like Lake Formation. Question 15. A large e-commerce company has a Redshift cluster that receives a long-running query exceeding 2 hours every hour, causing shorter queries to queue. Which cost-effective solution optimizes query execution for all users? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Creating a dedicated WLM queue for the long-running query isolates it from the general query pool, preventing it from consuming slots that short queries need. Enabling concurrency scaling on the remaining queues allows Redshift to automatically provision additional transient cluster capacity when short query demand spikes, ensuring all users experience consistently fast performance. Concurrency scaling charges apply only while the additional capacity is actively processing queries, keeping costs proportional to actual usage. Terminating the long-running query frees resources temporarily, but does not address the underlying architectural issue and may break business-critical processing. Adding nodes increases baseline cluster cost continuously, even during the majority of time when the long-running query is not running, making it less cost-effective than concurrency scaling. Short query acceleration helps short queries avoid queuing behind longer ones, but does not prevent the long-running query from consuming significant cluster resources that affect overall throughput. Question 16. A company uses multiple AWS accounts and wants to streamline logging queries across all accounts with minimal setup and management overhead. Which solution is most efficient? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. AWS CloudTrail Lake integrates collection, storage, optimization, and SQL-based querying of activity logs into a single managed service. It supports multi-account and multi-region event aggregation natively, includes sample queries for common security investigation scenarios, stores data with a default 7-year retention period, and provides an immutable event store. All of this is available without building custom data processing pipelines or managing separate storage systems. AWS Lake Formation is designed for building and managing secure data lakes for analytics and ML workloads and is not a purpose-built centralized logging solution. It would require additional configuration to ingest and organize CloudTrail logs. Manually building a data lake in S3 for each account requires significant effort to set up cross-account replication and a query layer, which is precisely the overhead CloudTrail Lake eliminates. Amazon Athena can query logs but requires a separate centralized data store, replication pipelines, and schema management before it can serve as a multi-account logging solution. Question 17. Northwind Retail uses Amazon QuickSight to build dashboards for regional sales managers. Each manager should only see data from their own region. The dataset contains a region column and is stored in Spice. The company uses QuickSight Enterprise Edition, which QuickSight feature should the data engineer configure to enforce this access control. Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Row-level security, RLS, in QuickSight uses a rules dataset or file that maps each user or group to the specific data they are allowed to see. By creating rules that map each regional manager's username to their region value, QuickSight automatically filters the data so each manager only sees rows matching their assigned region. This works with both Spice and direct query datasets. Creating separate datasets per region creates data duplication and management overhead that scales poorly as regions are added. Column-level security restricts access to entire columns, not specific row values, so it cannot filter by region. Separate analyses do not enforce access control since a manager could potentially be given access to another analysis. Question 18. Adatum Global has an S3 data lake with Parquet files organized by date partitions. Athena queries frequently scan an entire year of data because new partitions are added daily by an automated pipeline, and analysts often forget to add partition filters. The data engineer wants to enforce a maximum scan limit to prevent runaway query costs. Which solution meets this requirement? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Athena workgroups support the byte scan cutoff per query setting, which cancels any query that exceeds the specified data scan threshold. This directly prevents runaway costs by failing queries that scan too much data, prompting analysts to add appropriate partition filters. S3 requester pays changes billing allocation, but does not prevent excessive scanning or control costs. Moving partitions to Glacier makes historical data completely inaccessible to Athena since Redshift Spectrum and Athena cannot query Glacier storage classes, which defeats the purpose of having a queryable data lake. IAM policies cannot evaluate estimated scan sizes at query submission time, since there is no IAM condition key for Athena data scan amounts. Question 19. A data engineer uses Amazon Athena to analyze 3 years of data totaling over 50 GB stored in S3 and highly partitioned by date. Queries frequently time out as the dataset grows. How can this issue be resolved with the least operational overhead? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Partition projection eliminates the need for Athena to load and parse partition metadata from the Glue data catalog before executing each query. For highly partitioned tables with years of date-based partitions, the metadata loading phase itself can account for a significant portion of query startup time. By configuring table properties that define the partition value range and format, Athena computes the relevant partition paths directly from the where clause predicates, bypassing the metadata lookup entirely and immediately narrowing the data scanned to only the relevant date partitions. Query result reuse returns cached results for identical repeated queries, but does not improve the initial query execution time or reduce the startup overhead caused by partition metadata loading. Athena UDFs add custom processing logic to individual rows within a query and do not address the architectural performance issue of scanning too many partitions. CTAS can reorganize data into fewer partitions, but requires executing the reorganization as an initial step, choosing new partition granularities, updating table definitions, and managing the resulting tables, adding substantial operational overhead. Question 20. A data engineer at Contoso Media is configuring Amazon MSK for a streaming analytics platform. The cluster processes clickstream data from a website with 100 million daily events. Multiple consumer groups need to read from the same topics, including a real-time dashboard application, a Flink analytics job, and a data firehose delivery stream to S3. The security team requires that each consumer authenticates independently and that access is controlled through standard AWS IAM policies. Which MSK authentication mechanism should the engineer configure? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. SASL/IAM authentication integrates directly with AWS IAM, allowing each consumer to authenticate using IAM roles and policies. This provides standard AWS IAM policy-based access control without managing separate credentials or certificates. When SASL/IAM is enabled, Kafka ACLs have no effect. All authorization is handled through IAM policies, which aligns with the security team's requirement. SASL/SCRAM requires managing username password credentials in Secrets Manager with a required Amazon MSK prefix and uses Kafka ACLS for authorization rather than IAM policies. Mutual TLS requires certificate management through ACM Private CA and also relies on Kafka ACLS for authorization. Unauthenticated access provides no consumer-level authentication, and security group IP restrictions are insufficient for individual consumer identity control. That is the end of practice exam number 5. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.